You're listening to The Bible Revealed, a podcast empowering you to understand the Bible and transform your faith. If you've ever felt intimidated or unsure about reading your Bible, then this show is for you. So get ready to be encouraged, equipped, and strengthened in your faith. And now, here's your host, Pastor Phil Ayers.
Well, hi, and welcome to The Bible Revealed. My name is Phil Ayers. I'm a pastor at a church just outside of Orlando, and I'm really glad that you're listening. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for sharing the podcast with a friend. Now, on today's podcast, I want to talk about prayer, how to pray. I'm going to give you 4 simple ideas, but first, I want to ask you to consider helping the Bible Revealed podcast financially. If you're like me, you want to see the Bible take root in your life, and you probably know people who could benefit from understanding the Bible to its fullest as well. And that's my mission here. And there's some cost to it. It's not a ton, but I would love it if you would head over to my Patreon page and consider signing up for one of the support tiers. I won't go through them, but just to give you an idea, at just $2 a month for the podcast, you'll get access to an exclusive podcast with no advertisements, which means nothing like this. We're going to get right to the good stuff. So stay tuned to the end of the show. I'll give you the full details on that, or just check the show notes for the link to Patreon. I appreciate it. So as far as prayer goes, let me ask you, how do you do with prayer? Like, how's it going? How's your prayer life going? That's what I'm asking. If I'm going to be honest with you, I sort of struggle with prayer. No, I don't sort of struggle. I struggle. And for people that know me, that might be a surprise, not because I'm hyper spiritual or something, but because I'm a pastor. And I think they would probably assume, oh, well, he spends probably most of his time praying. No, like everybody that's human, I struggle with that as a discipline. And I do think that prayer is a discipline. Have you ever noticed this? Some of the things that are disciplines, that are important things to do, are also pretty difficult to do. Like, for example, if you're somebody who's trying to eat right, maybe you're trying to lose weight, or you're trying to get in shape or prepare for some kind of a race or something like that. It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to remember to wake up in the morning and work out or eat the right foods. It's difficult. That's a discipline. Another area that's difficult is budgeting. This is really important. Figuring out how much money that you have, how much money to give back to God, how much money to put away for savings, how to take care of your expenses. That's a discipline. You have to sit down at your kitchen table once a week, once a month, get those numbers out, get a calculator out, and figure it out. Reading the Bible is also a discipline. Reading the Bible is a discipline. If you don't concentrate on it, you probably will forget to do it. And by the way, discipline seems to have some kind of a negative connotation because we say, oh, we were disciplined by our parents, and that sounds negative. But actually, discipline is not a bad idea. I mean, the word disciple and discipline are related. It's the idea of growth and growing. And I think prayer is a discipline. What I'm saying is, it's important, and if you want to develop a prayer life that is satisfying and helps you grow closer to God, I think that it's a discipline. And what I want to share with you in this show is 4 principles that will help you build a successful prayer life. 4 disciplines that will help you develop a successful prayer life. We'll jump right into it. Here's my first one. Okay, principle number 1. When you pray, pray simply. Pray simply. What does that mean? Well, how many times have you heard somebody pray in the King James Version of the Bible? You know what I mean? I grew up in this church, and, it was full of older dudes who I think they were trying to outpray each other sometimes. You know how that kind of goes? The prayer might sound like this. O sovereign Lord, exalted high in the heavenly realms, we beseech thee in our great time of need. Thou art our protector, our shepherd, our keeper, and on like that. And that sounds super spiritual, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds pretty good. It sounds like the Bible. The problem is God doesn't need you to speak like that in order to be heard. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think God might be wondering, why are you talking like that? You don't talk like that in your regular life. We haven't talked like that for the last 500 years. Here's what it says in the book of Matthew, and this was what Jesus said, Matthew 6:7, when he was teaching his disciples how to pray. He said, when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. I think it's important for us to pray exactly like we speak, just to be natural and to be comfortable with it. I remember one time in college, there was a guy who was new to school. I went to a Bible college. I was a Bible studies major. And this guy came into the Bible program, and he was a pretty new believer. And he didn't fit in like the rest of us. We were all very churchy young men, and he was kind of a party goer, a party animal. But he had changed his life. And I remember one time we all gathered around the circle to pray, and we were praying and taking turns. And then he started praying, and it was obvious he didn't know that there was this special language. I'm doing air quotes. And his prayer sounded like this. Hey, God, it's me. You remember me? I like this school. I like these people. It's really cool. Thanks for everything. Bye. I remember thinking, he actually said bye in his prayer. He didn't say amen. But I almost feel like, to a certain extent, it was refreshing because he was just being real. He was talking exactly like he spoke. And I think that does a couple things. Number one, I think it opens you up to being real with God. You're not searching for fancy words. The second thing I think it does is then when other people hear you pray, if you're praying out loud, they're not intimidated by prayer. I just asked this question in my church congregation this week. How many people, by a show of hands, are intimidated and don't like to pray out loud? I would say at least half of the people raised their hands. And I think a lot of that is because they're used to hearing pray with this sort of flowery language and super Bible-y vocabulary. So when you just pray exactly like you speak and don't try to, complicate it, I think that it's more genuine. And I also think that anybody that hears you will appreciate that, and that might encourage them to pray as well. So pray simply. That's the first principle. Now, the second idea is to pray constantly. Pray constantly. Well, there's a Bible verse you probably know of. Well, you might know which one I'm thinking about. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17. In the end of this book, the Apostle Paul is writing, and he's giving this church in Thessalonica, he's giving them some sort of final encouragements. And one of the things he says is pray without ceasing. It's one of the shortest verses in the Bible. 3 words. Pray without ceasing. It's very simple. It means don't stop praying. Pray all the time. Pray continually. Now, a lot of people have a version of praying that would make this very difficult because, and maybe this is you envision prayer as something you do when it's quiet, you have your head bowed, you have your eyes closed, you have your hands folded, maybe you're even on your knees at your bedside, and you think, I can't pray constantly because I have to have my eyes open. I can't have my head bowed all the time. Well, this might surprise you, but the Bible never says anywhere that you're supposed to close your eyes when you pray. Now, you can close your eyes, you can bow your head, can fold your hands. Those are all things we tend to teach children because, it keeps their hands occupied, it allows them to focus, but you don't have to close your eyes. Now, once you realize that you can get beyond this simplistic view of prayer, it means that there are so many more moments that you can take to pray. You can pray while you're driving. You can pray while you're at work. You can pray. A friend of mine told me every time they hear an ambulance on the road, they just start praying. They might be driving or they might be walking their dog or something. You realize that it's more than just this moment of, okay, I'm going to pray now for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It's this sort of subconscious or maybe even conscious idea that everything you say, everything you do, everywhere you go, everything you see is wrapped in this idea of prayer, like this connection that you have with God all the time. I think a good example of this is breathing. Breathing and prayer are very similar. Let me explain. See, you're breathing most of the time and you're not aware of your breathing, but you are. It's automatic. But sometimes when things get busy, when you get stressed, or if you're afraid, or if you're anxious, that affects your breathing. Maybe you didn't realize that. There's a lot of studies that show this. When you're anxious, when you're stressed out, your breaths become shorter and there's less oxygen. And of course, that then makes you feel more stressed. And sometimes it's a good thing to do if you're stressed out is to take a really deep breath, just to breathe in and exhale and breathe in and exhale. And that sort of restarts your system to give you more oxygen, to help relieve stress, and so on and so forth like that. Prayer is very similar because when we get busy, we forget to be connected with God in everything. And sometimes we have to stop and pray, that kind of prayer where maybe you do bow your head and close your eyes. And that sort of can restart your connection to this sort of always being in this connection with God. And I think this is a really cool thing to do. That way, anytime you see something going on, there's already a kind of a quick prayer going back and forth between you and God in your mind. It's much more of a mindset than it is an activity. So you kind of have both. That's how you can pray constantly. The next thing is to pray persistently. Pray persistently. You're going to notice that I'm doing that pastor thing where all of the points are very similar, and that's on purpose, of course. Pray persistently. This comes from one of my absolute favorite parables in the Bible. It's one that kind of escaped me for a long time. You might be familiar with it or you might not. It's the parable of the persistent widow. So Jesus is teaching his disciples about prayer, and he tells them this parable. And here's what it says, verse 2, chapter 18, Luke. In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor respected man. And there was a widow in that city who kept coming to him and saying, "Give me justice against my adversary." For a while he refused, but afterward he said to himself, "Though I neither fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will give her justice so that she will not beat me down by continual coming." So here's the idea. Jesus tells a story about a judge who doesn't really care. He doesn't care about this woman. He doesn't respect her. He doesn't respect God. And this woman comes to him, and she's continually asking for justice. And he turns her down. He doesn't care. He dismisses her. But she comes over and over and over again. And finally goes, "Look, I'm just tired of hearing you. I'll give you the justice that you want." And Jesus is telling his disciples, this is how you should pray. And the idea isn't that God is like this judge who doesn't care. No, the point Jesus is trying to make is, if even this guy who doesn't care about God, this judge who's not a fair man, if he gives her what she wants because of persistence, imagine what God will do for his children that he loves. That's a great, great principle. It reminds me of the story, it reminds me of the movie Shawshank Redemption, if you remember this. The character, Andy Dufresne, is locked up unfairly, but he's trying to make the best of it, and he wants a library in the prison, and so he writes a letter to, the state, I guess, asking for funds for the library, and they turn him down over and over and over again, but he keeps on writing, and finally, they give him the money, and they ask him not to write any more letters. There's this principle that persistence works. Persistence is good for you, and God won't get tired of hearing you ask for it. If you're a parent, you probably think, okay, I get tired of when my kids are begging me for things. But that's because you're not perfect and you don't have perfect patience. God will never get tired of you asking. So if you have something that has been, on your heart and on your mind for a long time, don't stop praying about it. Maybe you're dealing with some kind of a sickness that is ongoing and you feel like you've prayed for a year, 2 years, 5 years, and you don't feel like you've gotten your answer. Jesus is saying, be persistent. Or maybe it's a financial thing. Maybe it's something with a relationship, a guy, a girl, husband, wife, whatever. God has unlimited patience, and he wants you to be persistent. He's given you permission to be persistent. So let me review before I go to the fourth one. Pray simply. Use your own words. Don't worry about trying to sound theological. Number 2, pray constantly. Kind of get yourself in a mindset where everything you do, say, think, and see, is this prayer that you have. Number 3, pray persistently. Don't give up asking for things that are important to you. And lastly, pray boldly. Pray boldly. This comes out of the book of Hebrews, chapter 4. The context here is this idea where the writer of Hebrews is talking about the Holy of Holies and being able to access God. Now, in the Old Testament, the tabernacle and the temple had a location in the center called the Holy of Holies. Well, it wasn't right in the center, but it was inside the temple. And in this location was where the Ark of the Covenant was, and also where the Spirit of God dwelt. And one time per year, the high priest was allowed to go into that Holy of Holies and offer a sacrifice for the sins of the people. Just once a year. It's a really, really big deal. He was the only person that was allowed to go in there and approach God that way. Now, here's what the writer of Hebrews says to the audience that he's writing to. He says, "Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin." Now here's the key point. "Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." Basically what he's saying is, you don't have to go to somebody else and have them take your concerns to God. You go directly to God because Jesus is functioning as the high priest. He gives you access directly to God. You might remember the story when Jesus died on the cross. The Bible says that curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple was torn in two. The significance there is you can go boldly to the throne of grace to receive the help that you need. I always envision this, if you can just envision this huge sort of palace and, imagine like a castle, a king's castle, and you're going into the throne room and you see guards lined up and then way at the other end, there's this huge throne and the king's there. And you would maybe sheepishly go into that room and make your request to the king or something like that because, he's the king, so powerful. The same idea is here, except you don't have to go sheepishly into that throne room. You can kick the door down, walk in, and approach God boldly with your request, having that kind of confidence to draw near to God. That's really, really powerful. So pray boldly, not without fear. Don't be afraid to ask for the things that you feel are important for you to grow spiritually, to be a good husband, to be a good wife, to be a good business owner. You know what I'm saying? Things that will glorify God. I mean, I'm not talking about, just praying for new cars and things like that. Don't get that idea. I'm talking about praying for things that are weighing on your heart. Things that you know are the right things, things that are within the will of God, praying for relationships, praying for other people, praying for this nation, for this country. Pray for those things with boldly and without fear. So let me just give you a couple of challenges and a few practical things too. Now, if you've never prayed before, if you're struggling with prayer, start small. Prayer actually takes some practice. It's like any other discipline. I mean, if you've never run, a marathon before, you're not going to go out and run a marathon, over the weekend. You've got to work up to it. And prayer is kind of the same way. So maybe set some time aside for some moments of prayer and then work on that continual connection to God as you go. One of the things that helps as well is to avoid distractions. If you know that you're easily distracted, go to a place to pray where you can't be distracted. If you don't know what to say, you can also read your prayers. The Psalms are a great place to go. Many of those Psalms are songs and prayers that David wrote. You can read those and count those as your prayers. You can consider them your prayers, or maybe use them like sort of starters, like get some ideas on what to pray for, reading those prayers too. And there's some use of technology that can be helpful too. I just got a new prayer app. It's called the Echo Prayer app, and it just kind of helps me remember. It helps me categorize my prayer requests. There's a place where you can notify people that you prayed for them, and also keep track of prayer requests that are answered. So that's not a bad idea either. There's some practical things there for praying. So in all of this, I hope it helps you pray more confidently, that helps you pray more often, helps you pray with some persistence, and then, of course, helps you put the prayer into your own words. Well, thanks again for listening to the Bible Revealed podcast. Don't forget to check out our Patreon page. It's at patreon.com/PhilAyers. You can jump in at any one of the support tiers and you get some exclusive podcast stuff. You get access to a private Facebook group, discussions, opinions on faith, that kind of stuff, and even a virtual small group that we're starting. I'm not going to go into it, but you can check it out in the show notes or on our Patreon page as well. Don't forget to support the sponsors of the show as well. That will help. And don't forget to share the show with other people that you know, maybe someone that needs some encouragement from the Bible, or somebody who's also interested in going deeper into the world. Today's show is brought to you by Bible Revealed Publishing, which is a ministry of the Pass Media Group. The show was recorded at Lost Dog Studio in Orlando, Florida, written and recorded by me, Phil Ayers, edited and mixed by Tony Holmes. Our producer is Dylan Kryenbrink. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time on The Bible Revealed.